Hey folks, Doc here. As promised, I've been able to start getting some stuff done around the shop again. The shop itself is an absolute nightmare. It's a disaster. I got some major cleaning to do. But, one thing at a time. I'll get there eventually. That's what I keep telling myself. Anyways, as some of you probably saw, I managed to get all the crap power washed off commando so I can start dealing with some of the things I wanted to deal with that. And I decided that I'm going to get a little bit more work done on the Diesel Weasel because it's been a while. You know, there hasn't been any progress or any updates on that since I entered the contest on ATLTF.com. And I'm trying to use the deadline as motivation to actually get this thing done in a reasonable period of time because, you know, sometimes I'll backburner a project and it goes away for years, as some of you are well aware. So I just want to try and keep myself motivated. So, you know, win, lose, draw, don't care, whatever. I'm just using the contest as an excuse to get this thing done. So, why don't I show you what I have gotten done so far. I love this hoist. My God, I love this hoist. And there it is, folks. Let me bring in for a closer look on what I've managed to get done. So I guess we'll start with the obvious in-your-face stuff first. And what's obvious and in-your-face is the front end. As you can probably tell here, I cut off the factory front axle and did away with it. Now, just before I get any further, I just want to point out that the tie rods and drag link and all that are just absolutely temporary. They're just tacked together in such a position that I can roll this thing around the shop without killing myself. No, the steering is not staying that way. Alright, moving on. So, I whacked off the front axle and threw it away, and I built a front frame rail extension on both sides to the tune of, I guess it was about an 18-inch piece of steel on both sides that actually sticks out from the front of the frame about 12 inches, forget the exact measurement, and did a cross member in between. And then as you can see, I basically built a drop axle. So I kicked the stubs up on either side on a 20-degree angle, I think it was, and zapped them in place as it were. I mean, I pre-cut the angle so it sat where I wanted it to, but yeah, I think they're 20 degrees. And then what I did, as you can probably tell, see if I can get this angle here, you can tell that the Kingpin is not straight up and down. My Kingpin inclination angle is 10 degrees, I believe it was. And so what I had to do, let me just pull this wheel off. These wheels are only on there for mock-up anyways. So if I can just kind of back up a little bit and give you a straight shot, more or less, so you can see that the axle is level and the Kingpin is not. The Kingpin is inclined 10 degrees at the top. It's the same on both sides. And that goes together to create a better steering geometry. I'll get back to that in a second. These wheels, get on there, are only temporary. This is my favorite right there. Look at that bad boy. I'm going to pop it like a zit. Anyways, turning over this way, again with the camera as level as I can get it, you can see the top of the Kingpin is tilted backwards by 8 degrees, and that's my caster angle. Anyways, you kind of can't see it on the bench here, but the combination of the Kingpin inclination angle and the caster angle helps load up the inside front tire during a turn. Normally, you know, a lot of the weight would come off the inside front, and you know that tire would start to scrub and not bite as much as it could. And by having it, you know, tilted back and tilted in as the Kingpin is, it kind of digs that tire into the turn, and that helps a lot too. The other benefit to the caster angle is the wheel will do what's known as castering, which is a natural return to center. So as you're motoring along, you know, you come out of a corner, it'll help straighten itself out instead of, you know, physically having to turn it back. One thing I have not yet done is re-angled the steering arms to employ the Ackermann angle. And trying to keep the explanation as short and simple as possible, when you're going around a corner, the inside tire turns a tighter radius than the outside tire does. And if your wheels steer to the same degree when you're steering, you know, one tire is going to have a tendency to scrub. And this will increase tire wear and it won't steer as effectively. The Ackermann principle allows for the difference in the two angles and makes it so that the inside tire and outside tire steer according to the radius of the circle. So basically, to engineer this on a go-kart or a lawn tractor or anything else, we're just going to take a look at the top of the steering arm here. There's your Kingpin, and there's the attachment point for your tie rod. Now, in order to apply the Ackermann angle on something with the steering arm facing backwards, is you basically want to take a string and run a string from the center of the Kingpin back to the center of the rear axle. We'll get back to that in a second. So your string is going to be on an angle that looks kind of like that, right? It's not going to be parallel to the wheel. It's going to be tilted backwards in an angle like that. So what you want to do is you want to cut off your steering arms and re-weld them on an angle so that the string that goes from the Kingpin to the center of the rear axle also intersects the point where the tie rod attaches to the steering arm. And that's how you engineer the Ackermann angle into something. Turning our attention to the back of the machine, you can see that I've got a 1-inch keyed live axle installed on pillow block bearings, and those are mounted directly to the frame, and they're on top of the frame as opposed to underneath. And then I took this wheelbarrow tub, because, well, I had to, let's face it, and just did some hacking and whacking on it to give it a little bit of shape and give my legs some clearance. And then I cut it out so that it could sit over top of the axle. Now when I engineer the seat in this thing, the seat is going to hump over the axle so that, well, your butt isn't getting shaved by that keyway. That's a good thing. As you can see, I've got a set of Craftsman running boards bolted to this thing because, well, frankly, I was really hard pressed for somewhere to put my feet. And you can see I've got this Midwest Super Cub gas pedal sitting there. And that's, kind of semi-almost rigged up. I've just got to come up with a couple of little cable clamps and stuff for that, and that's pretty much done there. In case anybody wants just a wee little bit more detail on the front end here, just to reiterate, I did cut off and throw away the factory front axle, and then I cut the tubes off and saved them, and I saved the knuckles. There were no spindles on it for whatever reason. I don't know if they were bolt through and they were removed or whatever. There was no spindles. So what I've got is some 3/4 inch by 6 inch grade 5 bolts here that I literally just welded to the knuckle on a 10-degree angle to compensate for the 10-degree angle here. So, 10 degrees one way, 10 degrees the other way, and the wheel ends up perpendicular to the road. So that's what I did there. Is a 3/4 inch by 6 inch bolt here. I can cut it to my appropriate length later. I'll probably just cross drill it and pin it, whatever the case may be. And that's what I did there. So as you can see, the steering does work. But it is complete and total garbage. It's not staying at all this way. This was just so I could roll it around the shop. A little disconcerting. So there, folks, is your Diesel Weasel update. Basically, she's on all fours. I've got to find some front tires that are going to work for this. I've got this just absolutely fried vintage Sears tire on one side. I already took the one off the other side and put on a wheelbarrow tire, with an inner tube and the Sears wheel just to see what that would do. So that's one option. It's not exactly a high-speed tire, but meh, what the hell. I'm going to die one way or the other someday. So anyways, in order to get this thing, running and serviceable and functional and be able to do the first takedown runs, I've got to come up with some front tires. I've got to get the CVT all in place. Which means I'm going to have to build mounts for the jack shaft, etc., etc., etc. I've got to run a chain to the rear sprocket. That brake caliper works well, but I need new pads, like desperately. And so I've got to get that caliper mounted, and I've got to get the caliper mounted. I've got to get the master cylinder mounted, and I've got to come up with, a brake pedal or whatever the case may be. So tires, CVT, chain, brakes. I've got to rig some sort of an exhaust so it's not just going at the side of the hood while I'm test driving, because that sucks. And I'm going to have to do some sort of an air intake thing too, because even on the shakedown run I don't want to be sucking dust into this engine, which, they're dear and hard to find. So that's your project update, and thanks for tuning into Sprocket's Garage on YouTube, and until next time, take care of yourself.